everybody. I'm going to try screen because we don't have our mic set up. But anyways, thank you very much for coming to the Black History Film Festival. So the films we'll be screening today, there will be two films that we'll be screening, Bank for Your Buck and For Humanity. We'll be having a director for Humanity also join us. So we'll plead with you to stay with us till the end of the film as well as during the conversation. But we are doing this festival throughout the week from 5 to about 7:30. So please join us every day, just not today. So with not much to be said, I just also want to mention that, as you can see, there's a camera here, so we are filming. So being here, we are assuming that you are giving us consent to use your image, likeness, and voice. And also, if all phones could be put on silent or whilst the movie is going on, would be really grateful. But anyways, I'm proud about today film festival and
and really quick, if I can recognize some people in the audience, we have Mfundishi, who is here out of Tanzania by way of the U.S., and he'll be giving a talk on Thursday for our seminars at 9 a.m., and it's going to be dealing with Medunecha and Ma'at. For those who don't know what Ma'at is, it's the very first concept of truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balanced order, and reciprocity. So when we think about justice systems in the world, it started right here in Africa, and you can learn more about it on Thursday. We have Efosala in the audience with his students. From NAFTI, this is the National Film and Television Institute. So they are here in their numbers, so we'd like to give him a round of applause for bringing the students here. We have Dr. Samori Kamara. I think he has a basketball team with him. Fantastic, glad to have him here. We have one of our directors for Friday's film, Salasi, also in the audience. And we have even more important, we have Dr. Carnita Groves, a celebrity. And most importantly, we have each and every one of you. Give yourselves a round of applause. Was I met you or not yet? And we are excited because this promises to be a Blacknificent, Black Powerful, Blacktastic, Blackorific, Blackcellent, Blacktacular, Blacktabulous, Black History Month Film Festival. Hope everyone found the documentaries, the two documentaries actually, Blacktastic, Blacknificent, Blackorific, Blacktabulous, Black Powerful, Spectacular. I didn't hear Black for Black History Month. And we have already the directors of our second film, For Humanity. This is Dr. Kemet Shockley. You may remember him from the documentary. And then also Brother Kofi, who is his student. And also they were setting up the speakers so that you can hear them a little bit louder in the room. And they are broadcasting to us live from Howard University in Washington, D.C. So let's give them a round of applause.
Thank you so much.
Very good. We're very proud. He said Mendasi, so you see you in the chief. And yes, very good. All right, so we had two very interesting films. The first one was in Burundi, where the way people resolve their conflicts is by throwing grenades. And then we saw Africans in Colombia who held on to the ways of their ancestors. Even though they're not physically located on the African continent, they have maintained their ways as African people, right? And we put those two together just to show you a contrast, because sometimes we'll assume that anyone who happens to be on the African continent is in their right African mind. But sometimes that's not the case. You can be in a different location, but maintain your African mind. So let's open up the floor. Dr. Shockley
Yes.
And Brother Kofi, do you have any words that you'd like to share before we open up the floor for Q&A?
Just very, very grateful for you guys having seen the video. Brother, we hope that we can record this, because there's no greater honor than to be able to share the work with brothers and sisters on the continent. It means a lot to us that you've seen it, to hear what you have to say about it.
I echo the same sentiment. It's an honor to have the film being shown on the continent. We look forward to the Q&A, and thank you for having us.
Very good. So we are recording. We have our setup here to record, and then we're also recording online, so we'll get it both ways. If it's not documented, it never happened. All right. So let's open it up. Any thoughts, reactions, feelings, questions? Especially we have our directors here who can give you so much more information, so we're very honored to have them. Any?
Yes.
And we have, we're pleased to also have some filmmakers in the making. They're from the National Film and Television Institute, and one of our PhD students is their teacher, so he brought all of them. So this whole side of the audience, all of them are like baby directors. They're just like budding and growing, and I don't know what to say. But do you have any comments?
Awesome.
One here, one there.
My name is Jessica, and I'm from National Film and Television. And I wanted to ask a question about the landscape. So according to the king, he says. So according to the king, the slaves are from different places, right? Different countries, right?
The Africans are from different countries?
Yeah.
So there's a difference between an African and a slave. If you look at the etymology of slave, it comes from the Slavic people. So it's like Yugoslavia, right? And it's because there was a man named Otto the Gross, or Otto the Great, who enslaved white people. So anytime you call black people a slave, this is very inappropriate, because none of us are Slavic. So these are African people who've been put into a situation like those Slavic people. So we say these are enslaved African people, because when you call them slaves, you're taking away their identity. And obviously they fought very hard to keep the identity that even many of us here on the continent, we haven't fought that hard, right? So we should respect that fight.
Okay, so according to the king, he says the Africans come from like different countries, right?
Yes.
And they came together. I want to know how they communicated, and also how they came about with one language. Because I know it's not going to be like just one day or two to get that particular language to communicate with. So how were they communicating?
All right, did you hear the first question?
I think, did she say how did they communicate during the time that they were being transported? Is that what she was asking?
Or once they got there?
When they got
Once
there,
they got there, they were forced to learn the language of their enslavers. So they were forced to learn Spanish. They communicated that way. And then different groups of people, for example, some people had come from Congo, some people had come from Angola, etc. And so they were communicating with each other with small groups of people who had come from different places on the continent of Africa. Can you hear me?
Is that clear? Yes, that's clear. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
king was captured, what did they find any other leader to lead them?
So did you get the question?
Didn't hear that one at all.
I was like, when the king was captured, did they find any other leader to lead them?
Brother Kofi, did you hear it?
So
No, I was ready to hear the Hindi.
when the king was captured, did they find any other leader to lead them?
Oh.
Yes. After Bekos Bioho was captured and murdered by the enemy, they had other Pelenqueros rise to power. One person who ended up leading the group was a man named Domingo. I'm sorry, Domingo Angola. And Domingo Angola was going to be like a second Bekos Bioho. After Domingo Angola, they had other people with that similar African spirit to lead and to seek sovereignty at all times, lead the group. So they were able to lead 3 or 4 additional Bekos Bioho-like figures who ended up leading the Pelenqueros.
So is that clear?
Okay, I'm Nadi. I don't have a question because she asked my question about how they were able to communicate since they came from different and was answered as well. And I also realized, it's new to me. I'm now figuring out how Africans have been able to live peacefully in, these European countries. Yeah.
Thank you.
We're gonna need that one repeated.
So that one was saying that her question was already asked, but she's been able to learn from the video, from the documentary, how black people have been able to live peacefully in these white countries.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. She said it's a difficult thing to live peacefully in a white country, but what we have is examples, especially with the Pelenqueros, we have an example of black people being able to live peacefully. However, you are always under attack, so you're only living peacefully to a degree. So what ends up happening is that every once in a while, they will come and try to disrupt the village. And right now the Europeans are trying very hard to bring drugs into the village.
So you got that? The Europeans are trying very hard to bring drugs into the village. So Colombia is known for cocaine and things of that nature. So the people have tried to preserve their own culture and stay united and stay peaceful. But there are attempts to try to bring drugs in to disrupt that African society that they have maintained for over 400 years. Okay, we have one to the back. We'll come back.
Yes, sir. I was expecting to see something on their form of worship. And then the next thing I want to know is whether that form of worship has actually give them the power to develop when it comes to technology. And I want to know the general view of black communities and how they are impacting the world through technology.
So is that one clear?
We definitely have to have all questions repeated.
Okay.
We can't hear anybody when they ask a question.
Okay, all right. So no problem. That was a question saying he expected to see their form of worship. So he has a question about what form of worship do they have and how, if any way, did that form of worship help them to live in the world with technology, right? And then the second part was? And then generally, what's the impact of these black communities on the world?
through technology and other ways?
Well, so the first part of the question is their form of worship. When they came on the slave ship, they were practicing African forms of worship. But what the Europeans did, which they also did to those of us who landed in the United States, is they made it illegal for you to practice an African form of religion. And they also would kill you if you practiced an African form of worship. So what has happened throughout the generations there and in the United States and in Jamaica and everywhere else is that the form of worship that they want us to practice, which typically on this side of the world has been Christianity, you're forced into Christianity. And many people don't understand the history, but you didn't really have any option but to be a Christian. So what they've also tried to do is to get back to their own original African forms of worship and religion. And they do have some of that goes on there. So you'll see them bringing out certain artifacts that speak to the African form of religion that they practiced before they got on the slave ship. For example, many of the people who are in Palenque come from a group of people in Angola called the Luango people. And the Luango had their own form of worship and their own understandings of the divine. For example, a lot of people in Ghana worship or believe in a god called Onyame, right? Well, it would be the same as if somebody said you can no longer worship or acknowledge Onyame, you now have to worship somebody else, and gave that person a name that was more fitting to the Europeans. So they're fighting to get back to their original worship, and we tried to help them by giving them pictures of Jesus that were more reminiscent of who they are, because the picture they had hanging up would look just like the people who captured them on the slave ship. And Brother Kofi, I don't know if you want to handle the part about what is the impact of this group on the modern world considering technology?
The impact of this group on the modern world considering technology.
Yeah.
So I would say the impact of the Palenqueros on the modern world considering technology is twofold. One is the Palenqueros are an example of people who have prioritized family over technology and prioritize their African culture over technology. We have to remember that when we are interacting with technology, most technology is created by Europeans. So we're actually interacting with Europeans. Social media is a form where a lot of what we do is tracked. A lot of what we do is recorded. And it's being used as, in one way, for us to communicate, but also another way to track us. So they're more focused on making sure that they are paying attention to each other and having those interpersonal relationships, as opposed to creating relationships with devices such as computers, such as cell phones. So you'll see people prioritizing speaking to their family over going on Facebook. I think that sends a powerful message to the world regarding technology, because I can tell you in the United States, people know more about how to navigate a cell phone than they do about their own family members. And it speaks value to what's important to them. They know more about Facebook than they do about their cousin. So the Palenqueros send a very valuable and powerful message about what technology represents. It's a distraction. Technology distracts you from the things that are important, which are family, community, in certain parts of the world, clan, tribe. So they're very clear on the role that technology should play in their lives, which is a secondary role, not a primary role. As we continue to learn from the Palenqueros, and I'll share an example, Kim and I went into their school, and we were sitting looking around, and we were like, no one here is on a cell phone. It was about an hour before we saw a student pull out a cell phone to check the time, and then they put their cell phone away. They were busy talking to their peers and interacting the way that African people normally interact. I can tell you, I lived in Ghana for a year in a village called Agogo, and I started to see over time the influence of technology and how it was distracting people. And just remembering that it is a weapon of mass destruction that can be used against us, and over time really has been used against us. And our culture is our technology. So when we think about European technology versus African technology, the Pele.
Right. Thank you. My name is Najat, and fellow film student. And also, if you had a chance to remake this film, what would you add? What would you take out?
Can you repeat, because I was fiddling with the camera?
Did you hear any of that? So she's asking, one, what's influenced, as in, wait, first, who is your target audience, as in for the film, and also if you had to remake the film, what would you take out, and then what would you redo? And last but not the least, too, how has like your choice of target audience influenced submissions to film festivals and whatnot?
I got the last two questions. Kofi, did you hear the first one?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
So our target audience when we first sat down were African people ages 6 and over. And when we thought about that target audience, we wanted to make sure that it was engaging. We wanted to make sure that we had animations and illustrations, but we also wanted to make sure that we sent a message of empowerment to Africans everywhere. Along with the film, we created a children's book, which I don't have. I wish I had a copy near me. But we created a children's book so that this story could be shared with young people from the time they're born, so that this Pele Carol story is for everyone. But that's our target audience, is all Africans everywhere. In terms of, we spoke about things that we would like, that we wish we would have added. One thing that we would have added are more features of families together, families doing things together, so that you get that picture of the interaction between husband and wife, and also the ways that the children are interacting with their parents. One of the reasons why we didn't capture much family life and include a lot of family life is we wanted to leave children out of the film. We wanted to focus on the adults and protect the children, because too often Black children are in films and are shown to be vulnerable, and they aren't protected in the right ways. So one thing that we wanted to do is make sure that the children are protected and focus on the adults. But there's a way to capture family life and still protect the children. So I know that's one thing that we spoke about that we would have included. In terms of taking out, I don't know if we've had that conversation about what we would have taken out. We edited a lot of things out that we didn't want in there. So I think we may have gotten everything out. And then did you want to answer the last part?
She asked about film festivals. What was the question though?
Yes.
What did she ask about film festivals?
Go ahead.
Well, it's good. The way she phrased it was, has your audience, your intended target audience, affected your film festival submission? So is it for Black people? Is it for white people? Is it for everyone? And if so, whatever that is, how has that determined what film festivals you have submitted to? And she's asking as a film student.
I love your answer to this.
It's a good question there. We said the film was made for all of humanity, Africans first. So we wanted to reach everybody because we feel like the Pele Carols have a lot to teach people of African descent, as well as maybe we could get Europeans to think differently about the ways that they run the world. However, so what we did is we submitted the film to film festivals that are mostly white audiences, as well as black audiences and other audiences as well. We may be showing it in Colombia at a film festival. But of the film festivals we submitted to, all of the black film festivals accepted the video. All of the white film festivals rejected it. The problem we have is that white people can't seem to bring themselves to reimagine black people in ways that are different than the way that they have cast us to be in their films, in their movies, in their art. So black people are a certain kind of people, usually something negative. What this film shows is that black people are not only something negative, but that they are the mothers and fathers of the world, and that they also have more than positive contributions to make. That they can actually help us solve some of humanity's most difficult problems. That is not the way that people of European descent see African people. That's not the way they see them in Ghana. It's not the way they see them on the south side of Detroit. It's not the way they see them in Washington, D.C. And it's not the way they see them anywhere. The way that we
really prioritize that African technology, which is the culture overall. So that's kind of how we see technology playing out in the impact of technology in Palanquero culture and what it can teach us around the world to prioritize our technology, which is our culture, over their technology, which is gadgets.
Thank you again. This is a really fantastic opportunity. I love what you just said about the cell phone, because during this movie, your movie and the first one, there was, during this movie and also the first movie that we watched, there were several people in this, there were several people in this room who were constantly on their cell phone during this movie, right now that we were watching. And I would be curious to hear what you would have to say to them based on what you observed with the young people and their cell phones. What advice would you say to people in this room right now going forward, the next time they're watching an important film, or the next time they're sitting with a family member or a friend or a lover, and they're tempted to pull their cell phone out, as so many here right now as I'm speaking have in their hands right now turned on. What would you have to say to that?
I would say, because I feel like I'm a part of the generation that the experiment was tried on, that the cell phone is a distraction. It was created to keep us away from who we are. And the more time we spend on the cell phone, the more time we're spending away from who we actually are as African people. So our ancestors developed the highest form of culture, spirituality, technology, intellectual thought without a cell phone, without European technology. And if we're going to continue to strive to get back there and then eventually get back there and build on our greatness, it's going to be without their creation. It's going to be with our creations. So just try to stay off the cell phone as much as possible and try to stay focused. That would be what I would say. And of course, we're bombarded with technology in the United States. From cell phones to computer screens to television to when you're driving down the street, they have the billboards that are now LED and are flashing all types of European propaganda.
The thing is to not be distracted by it and to remain as focused as possible on what we need to be doing as African people, which is for many of us re-Africanizing, working towards sovereignty, and once we get there, really building our institutions and advancing those institutions and creating an African future for ourselves and for generations to come. And the cell phone is definitely something that is getting in the way of that.
And let me just add one little thing to that. Thanks, Brother Kofi. I wanted to, certain things give us an advantage. The people of African descent have an advantage when they can communicate with one another face to face, and when they use their culture. When Europeans have developed technology that takes you away from people that you, for example, in black families in the United States, before cell phone technology and things of that nature, we were much more together, much more in one another's space. Your auntie came over and you had lunch and, well, you had dinner together and you had weekend time together. What the technology has done in the United States to black people is taken some of our advantage away, because we're really good when we're face to face. The Europeans are better at things like writing notes to each other, and then the note can be misinterpreted and it can cause problems between two people. You can't always put the full intention of what you're trying to communicate in the little note. And also technology is snoopy. It's about snooping on people. So it can create problems, and it has created problems between friends of mine and my own family. So you really have to be careful thinking that it's going to be safe and that it's not going to cause problems, disruptions, and distractions.
Sure.
Please introduce yourself.
My name is Aha, and I am curious about how you found the Paranke people, and I'd also want to know if you have discovered any more communities that are living harmoniously like the Paranke people are.
So you got that?
No, just the last part about other Maroon communities. What was the first part?
How did you discover the Palenque people, and are there other similar communities like Palenque in the U.S. or
anywhere
anywhere
living in that manner?
Well, we discovered this community in our conversations with each other when Kofi came to Howard University to work as a doctoral student. He told me that his wife is from Colombia, and she's from a place that's not too far from where Palenque is. And he told me that they have a village there where the Africans live more independent than other Africans. So he explained, after we talked, we realized that this is a Maroon community. Our first goal was to just go there and learn from them and do some recording. We had listened to elders who told us time and time again, you've got to study the Maroons. So I had an elder named Dr. Asa Hilliard who told me, he was one of my mentors, you've got to study the Maroons and learn from the Maroons. Kofi's mentors told him the same thing. So when we, so we went on that accord. That's how we actually discovered them. Kofi already knew about them through his wife, who was from a nearby area. And then what happens is that, are there other Maroon communities? Yes, there are other Maroon communities. There are not thousands, but there are others. The best news I have to deliver about Maroon communities is that I'm pretty sure we don't know about most of them. So there's a lot of them that are hidden away, and I think they should stay that way. Because as we can see, what happens when Europeans begin to come in and bring drugs and do other things to cause distractions, you find yourself in a world of trouble. So yeah, we are actually going to be studying a couple of other Maroon groups and making more videos about the Maroons. But again, We advise those who are out there to stay off the technology and stay off the grid so that they don't get discovered.
Yeah. And can I just add one thing to your past previous comment? The Maroon community that you saw, the Pilinqueros, from 1714 into 1950, they were in isolation, practicing their culture and just being. In 1950-51, a European was in Colombia searching around and ended up stumbling on the Pilinquero village. And the European left the village after learning and doing some studying and wrote a book saying that these Africans were backwards. They were bathing and then drinking the water that they bathed in. They were running around naked. He ended up taking all of the erroneous stereotypes that they have associated with African people that are just false, and spreading those around Spain, around the United States, and other parts of Colombia, just lying on these people. So that was the Pilinqueros' reintroduction into the world in 1951. And they are still suffering from that initial European coming in and lying on them, to where people hear their name in Colombia and start to think negative thoughts. So just understanding, as Dr. Shockley said, the beauty of being in isolation and not being found, and just being able to be an African without that outside nonsense is one of the things that we know it still exists, and hopefully they're not found. They just get to continue to live in African harmony.
That's right.
I remember recently there was a story about a missionary who went to an island in the Pacific Island. Yeah. And they shot him with arrows. I said, that's the Border Patrol. That's that old time Border Patrol. We have a very lively audience today. We have quite a few questions, so I hope you have some time for us.
Sure.
Okay, so from the documentary, I noticed that they are open to tourism, and I'm curious about how this documentary has opened them up to visitors, because I suspect it is likely to happen. I have been sitting here and thinking, okay, when do I make money to go to Palanque? So I'm just curious about how, if in any way this documentary has opened them up to tourism and all of its bad effects.
Yeah, we're gonna need it. We're gonna need to hear that again.
No problem. So how has this documentary opened them up perhaps to tourism, along with as well some of the bad effects that come with tourism? So, we were talking about staying off the grid and staying off the map. They are now very gritty and mappy. So has there been any subsequent consequences or any good effects, if there are any that you know of that you can share due to the documentary?
It's a good question. It's always it's a complicated issue of wanting to make sure that we document what's going on among the Africans everywhere, because our people need to know what's going on. And then as you educate people, you also are letting other people know that they exist. So it's just like a lot of things, the way that people use information these days. You can use information so that you know more than other people, or you can use information so that you can engage in transformation, personal transformation toward being a better and the best person that you can possibly be. If you don't share information with people, then they don't know. But if you do, there's always going to be that negative effect of somebody using the information to harm other people. So this film is new enough that I don't think that it has yet experienced a lot of people who are trying to go there because they've seen it, but we don't deny that that could happen. We've had a number of people where we've shown the film the most say, well, can you go there? And what we tend to answer that question by is you should go after you do some personal study and get your brain to the point and your thinking to the point where you could go with the right kind of mindset. Because just like when I've been to Ghana a couple times, and whenever I take a group to Ghana or Nigeria or Senegal, etc., places where I've been, whenever we go, I always first have people engage in study and thinking about what are the things that are already in your mind that you've been contaminated by in the European society in which we live that need to be corrected so that when you go, you'll understand what you're seeing from a positive perspective of the people. So, you know, it's a thing that we have to do. We have to study each other, we have to learn each other, and we have to rid ourselves of the things we think about each other that are ridiculous and have really no basis in the truth. So that becomes our personal responsibility to understand that we're all one family. That's our responsibility. So it could increase tourism, but what we would hope is that if you watch the video first, you would go with the right mindset when you go there.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I also wanted to for me, there were two things that really struck me in the film. One, the first being the athlete who later was the reason why, what do you call it, electricity was brought into the community. And it did bring me back to, I mean, recently when Gucci made a blackface sweater, and then, you know, there was like videos of Floyd Mayweather probably walking into a Gucci store, and they were trying to go like, yo, but don't you care about the boycott because of the racist like sweaters they were making? And he's like, for him, it's all about his money or whatnot. It was really striking how you have like in a community like Palenque, and then you have an athlete growing up who is really rooted in his community. He still goes out there and manages to bring fame, you know, bring his wealth and fame to develop the community and not just himself, which was the first thing. The second thing was the incident, the policing incident, how they come together to police themselves. And it took me back to like just this morning, working outside in my house alone, and these police officers just come right in front of my main gate, claiming that they are looking for certain Nigerians. I'm like, and I'm speaking Cree with them, and they are like, are you a Nigerian? I'm like, if I were Nigerian, would I be speaking this with you? But it was really funny. They said it, are you Nigerian? As if the word Nigerian was synonymous with criminals, and I should just like open my door and then let them in to come look for whatever. But for me, you have the incident of like community policing whereby people are not scared of the police, and then through that you see about, I mean, in the documentary it said I had at least, I think, 3 or 4 cases within its 400 years, which was really, really remarkable. My question to Dr. Kamish shortly, the director, is, as an African going into a Maroon African community, and then, you know, now I think a great problem being African is like thinking of these fragmented identities. I'm Ghanaian, so all Nigerians are bad. I'm Muslim, so all Christians are bad. You know, these little fragmented identities. Being an African and then going into Palenque, what was the reception like to an African who came from another part of the African world into this African community? How was the immersion done? How was the reception like? And then what's in your opinion being there with the reception like be for other Africans who intend going into this community? Will they be received, or are they looked at also from a fragmented perspective? Thank you.
So the question was, being in, he gave the example of in Ghana, you have this thing where Ghanaians, since Ghana must go and all this, don't get along with Nigerians and vice versa, and how we tend to think of ourselves in fragmented identities, the idea that Nigerians are criminals, so forth and so on. The question was, how was the reception for you all coming from a different part of the African world? Were you accepted on the basis of we're all black people, or was it, oh, you're American, or what was that reception like? Was it based on fragmented identities or an identification with a whole African race, black race throughout the world?
He directed that one to you, Kenneth.
Oh, did he? Sure. So the first, let me sort of say that in terms of our reception, we couldn't have been received with more grace. They received us that way because they don't see themselves as just any old Africans. They see themselves as the example for the rest of the African world to follow in terms of being free and sovereign. Now we know that they're more independent than perhaps we are here in the United States and other places in the world, but they see themselves as the example for other black people to follow in terms of having a community that is together, where you have no crime. Don't forget that these are the people who have not had a violent crime since the 1980s. These are people who have no divorce. They have a 0% divorce rate. These are people whose children, none of their children are waived. All of their children are accounted for and taken care of by their families. These are people who acknowledge their ancestors. In fact, Kofi and I are going back next week to participate in their veneration of their ancestors ceremony. So this isn't just any old group. This is a group that, while not perfect, as we said in the film, definitely have some very excellent things going on with themselves. So they know that when you come into the community, it's their responsibility to be the example to the rest of the black people on the planet as to how you're supposed to act. That you welcome people who are from you welcome Africans who are from other parts of the world. That you have to greet an elder when you come into the community, and we did greet the elders who, and then the elders gave us permission to sort of go about the community and work with the people and learn from the people in relationship to this documentary. The idea that Nigerians are criminals, for example, and a perception of Nigerians as criminals, I'd like to announce, in case there's anybody there who doesn't know, that's the same thing that they say about all Africans on the entire continent in the United States. And they say it about African Americans here. So no one is free of this thought. You might just think that people only thinking about Nigerians. You might think that they only say African Americans are lazy. But the truth of it is, all people of African descent, including in Ghana, are thought of as lazy criminals. So we have a lot of work to do to change the way we personally think about ourselves. I know that there's this idea about there's a friendly competition, maybe we should call it, between Ghana and Nigeria. My only suggestion is keep it friendly, because once it becomes unfriendly, like we have in the United States, we had people in the United States on the East Coast who were battling with black people on the West Coast, and the result of that was a bloody, murderous, just murder. In the 1990s, people killing each other because they were from the West Side, killing because they were from the East Side. All of this was put into the community by Europeans who financed and who put into the media and paid rappers and other people to create something that wasn't even real among the people. So we know the Hutu and the Tutsi in Rwanda experienced something sort of similar. The Europeans coming in and creating havoc among them. So we have to understand that it's going on all the time. We need community policing, but the hatred and the ridiculousness that we have going on among each other is only going to lead us one place, and that is to a place of complete and total isolation from each other. So this topic right now is critical, that we would talk across the Atlantic Ocean about coming together and we need to continue these conversations and make sure that we're prepared for Pan-Africanism, which is the idea that all people of African descent are African no matter where they might be on the planet.
And Really quick, you brought up Rwanda. The documentary we showed, it was a short one, 17 minutes. Right before this one was on Burundi and the civil war in Burundi. And because of the surplus of arms, the way that they solve conflicts is by throwing grenades at each other. So they interviewed many survivors of grenades. There was a family who the entire family was blown into smithereens by grenades. So it was a very stark contrast from looking here on the continent, the problem resolution, how it's done there in that particular context, versus Colombia, where they say we're all family. We've had 3 violent crimes in 400 years, not a jail, no police. So, you know, I think we've gotten, they say they want to be a model. I think we've gotten a very good model, much better than the Burundi model as it stands now. Because even the cameraman had to have an AK-47 in the corner.
That's right.
And I didn't see y'all in Colombia carrying your AKs, so I think y'all made out a lot better. I know we had a question here. Okay, you're next. Okay. About to check.
Hello.
Yes.
So you can see that the Palenqueros have asserted themselves culturally, in the sense that their political systems, their familial systems, and their work occupations and what have you are linked and traced down to the African origin. What I didn't see in the documentary had to do with education. The only instance education was mentioned was when one of the traders said it is essential to work so that you can obtain money to take your kids to school to feed your brain, and I quote. And then I saw school kids in uniforms, but very little was said about education. I would like to know if this cultural autonomy that traces down to the African roots reflects in the educational system that is practiced or used in Palenque. So how is the education, is it a Western style I have been introduced to, or they have a special one that is steeped into African origin? I would like to know that.
So very little was said about education. She saw or heard one woman say that she has to give money to send the children to school. Another, she saw children wearing uniforms, but she was wondering about the education system. What type is it? Is it one that's for black people, African liberation? Is it a anti-black type of schooling and the place of education? So if you could just speak to that issue, please.
So nationally, the education system in Colombia is very anti-African. They made small effort to try to include the history of African people in the curriculum, something called ethno-education. But honestly, they haven't dedicated the resources to the ethno-education program to make sure that it's being delivered correctly across the country. So what we understand, very few schools even offer ethno-education. In Palenque, they realized that the goal was to strip their young people of their African identity and turn them into Spanish people. They're in a country where Europeans from Spain invaded and destroyed what was there. So the system that they have is to turn you into a Spaniard, not only in speaking, but the way you dress, talk, and act. The Palenqueros realized that in the late 1970s that this Western style of education wasn't going to work for them. So in the early 1980s, they took over the education institution. Some of the things that they did was they took control over who would teach inside of the school. They made sure that Palenquero language was taught inside of the school. The rituals that they practice in the culture are taught to the children in the school. And that's actually governed
by the elders. One teacher shared that she had a student playing a game that wasn't of the culture. And an elder came over to her and said, that game is not appropriate. These are the games that our young people need to be playing, and taught that teacher the game and said, this is what they play inside of the school, so that all teachers are aware of how the culture should link with the school, and then things you can do inside of the school to ensure that the culture is incorporated inside of the educational institution. So they're very purposeful with the way that they've set up the education institution there. Now, it's a single school. So the Colombian government isn't paying much attention to what's happening inside of that school. As you saw in the film, there is a war against Black people in Colombia. Discrimination is very real. Racism is very real, and Black people are fighting back in Colombia. The way that they view the Palenqueros is, one, they're on a different side of the country, as opposed to where most of the fighting is happening in terms of human and civil rights. So the government's not paying much attention to what's happening in the Palenquero school. So they've taken advantage of that and said, well, we're going to make sure that it's linked to the home and that it's linked to the community. So you'll see the young people in uniform, and that's mandatory across the country that young people wear uniform to school. So they view that as, okay, you can have that. We'll wear your uniform to schools, but what happens inside of the building will reflect our culture and will build the types of people that we need to maintain our institutions moving forward. Now, with that being said, there are instances, because they have about a 95% graduation rate from what they told us. And most of those students do go on to college. So you're talking about people who are going into the professional world inside of Colombia. And as you saw, some of them move their way. They forget to practice the culture. They don't go back to Palenque, and they end up living in Cartagena or Barranquilla. But for the most part, the educational institution in Colombia is so effective that the young people continue to practice Palenquero culture when they become adults. And they continue to teach their children the importance of cuadros and juntas and the importance of identifying with their African heritage. So what we've seen with the education institution is that it's very effective, and that they're making sure that they continue to control it, because they understand the importance of controlling what happens from 8:30 to 3 o'clock every single day when it's concerning your young people. So that's what we've learned so far about what happens inside the school, the goals of the school, and their battle to take control of that institution.
Is that clear? We have
I'm so fast. You watched.
I think the first one was the Burundi. I want to ask some questions on Burundi. I don't know if you can answer.
So if we can answer, they haven't seen that film, but because we were here, then we may be able to feel it.
Okay,
But go ahead.
so in Burundi, apparently, there are discrimination based on how people address issues, and the people were attacked without knowing. In 1994, there were increase in weapons, and there was no development in Burundi. Personally, I didn't see the current state of Burundi. It looks like Burundi was the Burundi that they talked about. And if there was no change in what they used to do comparing to now, then what measures are they taking in place to make things right? Because yes, we know our topic is based on humanity, and humanity is the most important thing. So if measures are not taken in place to seize those things, then what's the current state of Burundi now? That's what I want to know. I want to know the current state of Burundi. Thank you.
Okay, so that's not directed towards you all? Okay.
But it was about the first documentary that was about Burundi, and it was a recent documentary that was done that basically shows that the long-lasting effects of that time, the proliferation of arms and weapons, is something that's still haunting the society. So long after the Civil War is over, we have people who are trained, and you saw that in there. They say everyone is trained. The one who was convicted for life, he said everyone knows how to use grenades and guns and things of that nature. So because it's so pervasive throughout the society, all they have to do is, if I have a problem with you, rather than sitting down and discussing things with you, then I'll do this. So basically, what the filmmaker set out to do was to sensitize people to this is the situation that's going on in Burundi, and perhaps through that intervention to try to make a way forward. Because again, and I think that really the way forward, and when we were selecting the films, myself and Yao, we were talking about this one gives hope, the second one gives hope, and also just to show when we have our values, when we respect our elders, when we're willing to sit down through dialogue, then things can be solved in a different type of way. But when you have a war-torn society, when you have a society that, even though it's on the African continent, all of those types of institutions, all those types of problem-solving means and methods have been basically uprooted intentionally by these white colonizers in order to undermine the society. And what wasn't going into so much in that documentary was the economic side of it, that who ultimately benefits from the bazookas, that those aren't bazooka factories in Burundi, who ultimately, benefits economically from all the AKs and the grenades and so forth and so on. So that's the other side that wasn't delved into so much. We see the end result of it, but ultimately we have to go to the manufacturers of the arms, who even get them in there. We see the small-time dealer at the end, but he's not the manufacturer. So someone has a vested interest in making sure black people are harming other black people, and we see this in the US too. What was mentioned before, the Bloods and the Crips. So they're at each other's throats, they're killing each other, and ultimately the whites are laughing all the way to the bank. You understand? So that's the situation, that's what the documentary is trying to highlight, so that, from the documentarian who's from there can sensitize people to the situation, so maybe things can change from there.
So the solution to the problem now is solving issues amicably, like one-on-one, other than going to burn down people's houses. That's the solution to the Burundi.
Yeah, right now, on our BB2, and you all got the flyers for that. We have a study group going right now where we're looking at a book called Mbongi. We're reading a book called Mbongi. And what it goes into is the traditional African political institution and how it's set up and how it's vastly different from these colonial governments that we've inherited. So in these governments, you see NPP versus NDC, you see all of these, types of things. But in the traditional government, you didn't have that type of situation. You have very similar to here, where they're saying in 400 years, they can remember, in my great-great-grandfather's time, someone committed a violent crime. So it goes into how those dialogues are settled, how all of the government of the society is done in collectives. So rather than having a minister who can be corrupt and bought off, that here you have a collective of 5 to 7 people, and it's very difficult for all of them to be bought off or corrupted. So even in the way that it's structured, that they're doing it in such a way that it brings about harmony in the society. And this is what we do when we set up our governments by ourselves and for ourselves. So I think the way forward is to look at what were we doing before these whites came in to destroy our societies. But before we can do that, we have to even know. So in Palenque, they've held on to that. In places on the continent where we haven't held on to that, it's very important for us to start to look at the idea of Sankofa. Because once we can do that, then we can see when we create for ourselves, when we create by ourselves, then we can come up with solutions that are beneficial to us, as opposed to those that benefit those who are selling and manufacturing the arms and laughing as we're killing each other.
We have in the back, and I think we're back to you all online.
So I've heard all these nice things about Palenque, the way they live. So are you trying to say that there's no negative way, like I said, there's nothing negative about the way they are living? Because like most of their infrastructures were like broken down, and there's nothing about health wise, like because the way they go farming and then they're just walking around. Isn't there any negative way of like living like that?
Okay, so we have two questions. I'll tell you what the first one is while the second one is coming on. She was saying that it seems like the view of Palenque is overwhelmingly positive. Are there any negative things there? She said the infrastructure looks like it's broken down. The people are walking to their farm. And I think that's kind of what the documentary started off with, that they have a whole lot less material wealth. So why would we go and, talk to these people? And, essentially we started to get that answer in terms of the people who have all the infrastructure are killing each other, but I'll let them answer that.
So my question has to do with the political
Second question.
My question has to do with the political system, because I saw that they had a council of elders, and we all know what the elders, the council of elders are responsible for in the society, in the African society. So I just want to know, are they directly affected by the political system of Colombia? Are they directly affected by it, and are they active in politics?
All right. So the question was, we saw the people in Colombia, the question was, are they directly affected by the political system, and are they active in politics? I think we saw that the president brought the lights after Kid Pembele won the world championship, but what's their interaction with politics there in Colombia, and are they affected by it?
Okay. So I'll start off by talking about the first question. That it seems like the view of People's Palenque is positive. The people's general view is positive. Is there any negative? And then there was some question about their infrastructure. Let me just kind of say that what we see in Palenque is what you get when people of African descent use what they have to build a society, and they place most of their emphasis on their family and community. Okay? So they haven't placed as much emphasis on the physical structure but they placed a lot of emphasis on their cultural and community structure. In the United States, we have the exact opposite. There is a lot of focus in the United States on creating institutions that are beautiful and that are extremely convenient to use. The physical structures in the United States are mostly extraordinarily nice. However, little to nothing goes into building the culture here. So what has happened is that people in the United States are killing each other at record rates. People are going to jail because they're committing crimes at record rates. People are going crazy. In fact, there's right now a big boom in the United States in relation to people being diagnosed with all kinds of mental illnesses and diseases. However, it's beautiful here. So you have to ask yourself, well, what would you rather have? What the Palenqueros have, which is a physical, has a physical look to it that isn't so beautiful, or do you want to have culture and community? You're going to have to choose, because a lot of times it seems like people can't have both. They've chosen to have community and culture. People's view of Palenque is generally positive. So you have the Afro-Colombians, which are Africans who, just like Afro-American, you have Afro-Brazilian, you have Afro-Colombians who are not in Palenque. And they see the Palenqueros as being the Africans of Colombia. So it's interesting that all of those people are Africans. But a lot of times, because of the culture that they practice in Palenque, the Afro-Colombians think of those Africans as being the Africans. Well, that's not really the case. They're incorrect. All of you all are Africans. It's just that some of you practice African culture and others of you are practicing Colombian culture. Just like we have Africans in the United States who practice African culture, and we have those who practice American culture. It's hard to practice an African culture anywhere in the Americas, though. It's very difficult because of what I just said to you a second ago, which has to do with what you have to choose. So people in the U.S. are oftentimes going along with the American thrust toward having nice things, but they don't worry so much about what kind of people they are. So you'll have a person who will lie to you. You'll have a person easily. You have people who will go behind your back and talk about you and your mama and say negative things about your children and not care about doing something that's going to cause you to have a major problem in your life. Don't even care. But they live in a great big old house that's very fancy and they drive a fancy car. So if you aspire to the kinds of things that people in this space aspire to, which is fancy houses, nice cars, and whether or not they're dressed to the nine, do they have on the best clothes, do they have on the Levi jeans, do they have on the best cologne and all these other kinds of things, they'll go after that. But when someone says, have you seen your mama lately? The answer is no. Why? Because I don't need to see her because I'm fine. You know, it's a value system that people here have. And what the Pele Kettles have is, have you seen your mom? Yeah, she's in the other room over there. So it's about what you value. And you have to value. I'll let Brother Kofi talk about political systems. But yeah, it's a difference. And we got to remember what's important.
Regarding political systems, similar to a lot of spaces on this planet where Africans were taken during enslavement time, the Pelenqueros and other Africans in Colombia are battling with the government. Those battles, like people making statements about the president's policy initiatives only benefit white Colombians. It means people protesting and fighting the police in the streets. It looks like people willingly leaving Colombia because they don't feel like there's a future for Black people. So the battle for recognition, the battle for humanity, being recognized as a human, is very real in Colombia. The Pelenqueros, because they are very serious about intelligence and learning, they are not only maintaining their culture, they're also placing themselves in certain political positions to have an impact on policy creation in Colombia. So you have a young woman who was in Washington, D.C., studying at Georgetown University, which is a good school based on United States ranking. And her goal was to go back to Colombia and change policy so that it would benefit Africans in Colombia. So the Pelenqueros are making strides in the political area to change the way not only that Pelenqueros are thought of, but also to influence the type of laws and policies that are created so that they are positive and in the favor of Black people. Which right now in Colombia, by and large, the policies and the laws are for Europeans, and they are not in favor of Black people, and Black people are suffering because of that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for this brilliant documentary. I really loved it, and so much food for thought. And I personally loved the animation. Good job. I really applaud your animation team. They did a really good job in retelling the stories. Yeah, my question is to Kenneth Shockley. Yes, not my question. Let me just say a few things first. Since you have links to Ghana, have you had any plans of studying other Maroon communities, especially Maroon nations with links to Ghana? Because we know for a fact that the Maroons of Jamaica have links with the Akan people of Ghana. And in fact, when you study the history very well, you know that the leaders of the Maroon nations in Jamaica were actually Akans with Akan names, like Kujo, Nani, you know, and they even have towns and cities named after Asanteland, like Ekompong, the Cromantings, and all that. And when you take a look at this guy's work, Professor Horace Campbell, who was just who just stepped out as the Nkrumah chair for Institute of African Studies, he has documented that quite extensively in his work, Rasta and Resistance. And you can tell that these Maroon nations actually gained independence. Apart from the Palenques, we can also.
We're getting some feedback. I'm not sure if that's from your side or our side. Can you hear? Can you all hear?
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear. There's been feedback the whole time for us.
I think since we are talking about Maroon Nation, I think it would also be a good idea to also recognize the Maroons of Jamaica, who actually gained independence, which was recognized by the British. The British actually had to make treaties with them and to report to the British government at the time, because they didn't know what to do. They reported for advice, and they felt threatened by these Maroon communities, and they actually recognized them as independent nations and signed treaties with them that will give you autonomy, you have your independence, and you don't come into our plantation to free more slaves. And you know, they had an extensive agreement between each other, which of course the British later breached and deported over 600 Maroons after the Second Maroon Wars. Now, my question is, if we have access to these Maroon communities, what are we doing to further reinforce these communities? Because as we all know, slavery still exists. Our people are still being oppressed. Black people are still, you know, struggling to liberate themselves, and we even need these Maroon state of mind more than even during the slavery days. And watching the Palenques, I feel like it's the community looks as if they are not surrounded by oppression, but there's still oppression, you know, all over. You don't see it physically in the documentary, but I'm sure, you know, when you go to the people, some of the people spoke about some of the racist experiences they encounter with, you know, the other Colombians. But my question is, how do we get these people back into the Maroon state of mind? That's my first question. And then my second question is, when you look at the elders, the guardians, the Maroon guardians, they all seem to be men, and I don't see women in the forefront of, you know, these decision making guardians. And what is the position of African women, especially in the Palenque Maroon community? What is their position on the decision-making level when it comes to the meetings with the Maroon guardians? Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna summarize that. The questions were, first, are you planning on doing any documentary or documentation of Maroon communities in Jamaica specifically, or any others that have connections to Ghana? I know there are some in Suriname, Guyana, so forth, and so Antigua, all these places. So one, but specifically Jamaica was mentioned here. So any documentaries on Maroon communities with connections to Ghana, Account, or otherwise. Two was the Maroon state of mind. What's being done to make sure that African people like Nana Asa Hilliard talked about the Maroon within us to activate that inner warrior in this day and age due to discrimination, so forth and so on. And then also the Maroon Guardians, the internal policing force. He mentioned that he didn't see any women there. So do women have a role in the Maroon Guard, or what's the role of women in leadership, in decision-making and leadership positions in Palenque?
Okay, let me start off with the first one. We also want to make more videos about other Maroon groups. If any of you out there know of people who have funding for things like that, we are actually in the process now of trying to raise funds to make our next video. If you want to email us at theka@gmail.com with any suggestions for funding sources, we will accept those that readily. So we are currently in the process of trying to do some work. Now, as far as Nanny in Jamaica, and I'm very much interested in doing some work there. Kofi and I just spoke maybe about a month ago about that being one of the places that we would like to capture and try to figure out what's going on there that may be different or even the same as what's happening in Colombia. So we are interested in doing that work. In relationship to the Maroon Guard, there are women in the Maroon Guard, but there are only a few because the Maroon Guard is seen as the protective force for the community. And they choose to have mostly elder men in the Maroon Guard. However, women and men are equally represented in the Council of Elders. So the decision-making force in the community is men and women. But the people who do the protecting are mostly men. And then finally, the Maroon state of mind. It's hard to get people in the Maroon state of mind because they won't turn off the TV. If we could get people to turn off the TV and turn off the rap music that has negative ideas and images in it, it would be a lot easier to move forward with what we're calling intellectual Maroonage. There's a really good piece that you should read by a guy named Uhuru Hotep, and it's called Intellectual Maroon. I make my students read that piece because it starts to cover just what you're talking about. I don't know if in Ghana you have people who seem like they are more attracted to anything white than they are the black stuff. But we have that problem with our black people here. We can't seem to get many of our black people to come over to thinking in a way that's going to be positive and meaningful for black people. They want to put stuff in their hair to turn their hair a different color than the natural color. They want to put eye contact lenses in their eye to make their eye not look brown. They want to put clothing on anything except African clothing. So you'll have me walking around in a dashiki like what I've got on now, and the Africans looking at me like, well, why in the world would you wear something like that? So we're warped in the mind, and we need to get ourselves together mentally so that we can get ourselves together spiritually. Now, if you have that problem, I can't imagine in Africa people would be looking down on African clothes. But I guess in this day and age, it wouldn't surprise me. So the first thing we have to do to get to a Maroon state of mind is to study what it means to be an African, and to understand that that's the only thing we should be trying to be. I've made the comparison before using dogs and cats, where if a dog was trained to meow instead of bark, how crazy would that dog actually be? And in order to get the dog back to a state of mind that's positive for itself, the first thing you have to do is to get it to practice its own culture. To get it to practice, dog culture is to bark. That's what dogs do. You bark when you're a dog, you don't meow.
That's right.
But we've got people in the United States, and I hope not in Ghana, dogs who meow. So we're in big trouble in relationship to our state of mind. And so the first thing you do is you study. I told you one piece by Uhuru Hotep. You should also pick up a piece that Baba Cambone just mentioned. He mentioned Asa Hilliard. Asa Hilliard's got a book called The Maroon Within Us. That's another one that should be picked up. I was one of Asa Hilliard's closest mentees. He mentored me very closely. And that was one of the books that I first read, that he suggested for me of his books to read first. And so I would suggest that one. But yeah, we definitely have to get ourselves to a Maroon state of mind, and we need a Maroon guard state of mind, so that when they kill young sisters over here, like the police killed a young black woman over here, when they pulled her over, her name was Sandra Bland, and when they pulled her over, she ended up dead somehow. We need to have a Maroon guard state of mind where if they kill our sisters, we actually take action against the people who are doing such things.
And Baba Kemet, maybe if you look on the video right now, you will see that not very many people are wearing clothes made by African people. But I think that we should highlight and honor those who are wearing clothes made by African people. So if you're wearing clothes made by African people, could you please stand up? And let's give those Africans a round of applause. We have 5, 6. So what they're doing is that they're financing our own people. What we are taught to do is to finance our exact same enemies that we're talking about right now, who are funneling grenades and guns. The money that is coming from our club.
Right, thank you. My name is Najat, and first of all, students. And also, if you had a chance to remake this film, what would you add? What would you take out?
Can you repeat, because I was fiddling with the camera?
Did you hear any of that? So she's asking, one, what's influenced, as in, wait, first, who is your target audience, as in for the film, and also if you had to remake the film, what would you take out, and then what would you redo? And last but not the least, too, how has like your choice of target audience influenced submissions to film festivals and whatnot?
I got the last 2 questions. Kofi, did you hear the first one?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
So our target audience when we first sat down were African people ages 6 and over. And when we thought about that target audience, we wanted to make sure that it was engaging. We wanted to make sure that we had animations and illustrations, but we also wanted to make sure that we sent a message of empowerment to Africans everywhere. Along with the film, we created a children's book, which I don't have. I wish I had a copy near me. But we created a children's book so that this story could be shared with young people from the time they're born, so that this Pele Carol story is for everyone. But that's our target audience, is all Africans everywhere. In terms of, we spoke about things that we would like, that we wish we would have added. One thing that we would have added are more features of families together, families doing things together, so that you get that picture of the interaction between husband and wife, and also the ways that the children are interacting with their parents. One of the reasons why we didn't capture much family life and include a lot of family life is we wanted to leave children out of the film. We wanted to focus on the adults and protect the children, because too often Black children are in films and are shown to be vulnerable, and they aren't protected in the right ways. So one thing that we wanted to do is make sure that the children are protected and focus on the adults. But there's a way to capture family life and still protect the children. So I know that's one thing that we spoke about that we would have included. In terms of taking out, I don't know if we've had that conversation about what we would have taken out. We edited a lot of things out that we didn't want in there. So I think we may have gotten everything out. And then did you want to answer the last part?
She asked about film festivals. What was the question though?
Yes.
What did she ask about film festivals?
Go ahead.
Well, it's good. The way she phrased it was, has your audience, your intended target audience, affected your film festival submission? So is it for black people? Is it for white people? Is it for everyone? And if so, whatever that is, how has that determined what film festivals you have submitted to? And she's asking as a film student.
I love your answer to this.
It was a good question there. We said the film was made for all of humanity Africans first. So we wanted to reach everybody because we feel like the Paling Carols have a lot to teach people of African descent, as well as maybe we could get Europeans to think differently about the ways that they run the world. However, so what we did is we submitted the film to film festivals that are mostly white audiences, as well as black audiences and other audiences as well. We may be showing it in Colombia at a film festival. But of the film festivals we submitted to, all of the black film festivals accepted the video. All of the white film festivals rejected it. The problem we have is that white people can't seem to bring themselves to reimagine black people in ways that are different than the way that they have cast us to be in their films, in their movies, in their art. So black people are a certain kind of people, usually something negative. What this film shows is that black people are not only something negative, but that they are the mothers and fathers of the world, and that they also have more than positive contributions to make. That they can actually help us solve some of humanity's most difficult problems. That is not the way that people of European descent see African people. That's not the way they see them in Ghana. It's not the way they see them on the south side of Detroit. It's not the way they see them in Washington, D.C. And it's not the way they see them anywhere. The way that we